Gold stays volatile. You're listening to Kitco Roundtable. I'm your host, Michael McCrae. Kitco correspondent Paul Harris is in. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Michael. Good morning.
Paul attended the big copper conference in Chile and is going to give us his latest intel. The Golden Triangle in Northwest British Columbia continues to make headlines with recent deals by Newmont and Barrick. Cole Evans, CEO of Enduro Metals, is going to guide us. How you doing, Cole?
Great, Michael. Great to be here. Thank you.
Cole, I know you're setting up camp. Could you thumbnail Enduro Metals for us?
Yeah, so Enduro is a junior explorer right in the kind of heart of where I'm sure we'll talk about later today, right in the center of the Golden Triangle. Our land package is nearly 700 square kilometers. It's one of the largest left that hasn't been swooped up by the majors, which seems to be a reoccurring theme here in the last few years. And there's a number of different things going on the property, but probably most significant was our new copper gold porphyry discovery just this past drilling season. That was highlighted by 331 meters of 0.71 copper equivalent right from surface, a brand new target. And, along with a lot of other numbers as well, that just being the highlight. But and we continue to have more drilling, geophysics, geochemical results rolling in through and getting started into what's hopefully going to be about triple the drilling season that we had in 2021, coming up here in a couple months in 2022.
Cole, I'm glad that you set us up by not only mentioning gold, but also mentioning copper. But let's start with the precious metal first. Huge swings this week for the metal, ranging from the 1950s to the 1880s, nearly a $70 difference. Gold prices traded down today with June gold futures off 1.1% to $1,927 an ounce. Obviously, gold continues to be roiled by what is happening with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Labor data was out today, which was mixed. The Friday Bureau of Labor of Statistics said that 431,000 jobs were created in March. Data missed expectations. Economists were forecasting job gains around 492,000. The numbers are still strong enough for the Fed to carry out tightening. By week's end, copper was trading lower, but it was still in the upper $4 a pound range. Copper was impacted by soft China economic data and COVID lockdowns. Copper is a strategic metal. Energy transition is going to require a lot of copper. However, there is a supply coming to the market in the short term with Ivanhoe's Kamoa-Kakula, Teck's QB2, and of course, Zijin's Serbian copper mine, among others. Now, Paul, you were at that big you were at that big copper conference that we hear about in Santiago. Can you talk us about what were some of the highlights that were from the show?
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you. Yes, I was at the CRU World Copper Conference this week in Santiago, which has been going for pretty much 20 years now. And for me, one of the sort of big takeaways is, we got record copper prices, $4.70 a pound. The specialist analysts such as CRU and others are forecasting a 6 million tonne per year copper deficit opening up in the medium term. Great times for copper. Everybody was really dumb. There was no buzz at all. There were no international CEOs there. There didn't seem to be any banks or finance people there. There's no big engineering firms there. There certainly wasn't a feel that in the executive suites, deals are being done or being brokered. For me, that just felt really, really weird. Obviously, we're in a situation where there's a lot of political risk in certain jurisdictions, such as Chile and Peru. So that perhaps took the edge off things. And Chile has got some quite stringent requirements for people to come in terms of their management of COVID-19. And so that probably had an impact as well in terms of who actually turned up. But some of the sort of key takeaways, though, ESG was a huge theme on the agenda and on the panels. And the perception is that it's in the process of passing from being a voluntary thing to be a mandatory thing. It's going to be demanded by government. It's going to be demanded by institutions and investors. It's going to be demanded by the whole sector. It's not going to be something that is voluntarily. Along those lines, the specialists think that the S aspect of that, the social, is going to become critical. Your social license to operate. Communities are going to become more demanding. They're demand more participation. And the feeling is that companies are increasingly going to have to give participation in their projects, free carried interest in their projects to the local communities or the local regional government in order for a project to proceed. I can't remember which person it was exactly, but it said this is going to become an expectation. And this perhaps in some ways follows a similar vein as what Mark Bristow at Barrick Gold has negotiated with Pakistan for Reko Diq. Other companies have done similar things. But, the feeling is this is going to become mainstream. Now, one of the interesting figures, I know we're not doing a number of the week this week, but this is a really good one. One of the CRU analysts said they estimate that to meet the challenge of this 6 million tonne per year supply deficit requires about $100 billion of investment in new projects. But digging into that, the pipeline is more than half the pipeline is greenfield projects. At the moment, mining companies are pretty much focused on brownfield projects where they've perhaps already got permitting, they've already got relationships with communities and local governments. Companies do not want to engage in greenfield developments at the moment. I guess the feeling is they're just high risk from a permitting point of view, from a cost overrun point of view, and certainly timeline to development. So again, there's a big disconnect there between what's happening in the market and the supply response. The supply response really is not happening at the moment. And again, that perhaps talks to some of the perceived political risk in Chile and Peru and perhaps some other places. Robert Friedland was all smiles, of course. He's, as you mentioned, Michael, bringing a big mine into production in Democratic Republic of Congo. He says there's very little political risk in Democratic Republic of Congo. All smiles. In continuing with that thought, he said that in his opinion, Barrick's Mark Bristow is the best CEO in the industry, in the mining industry. Barrick, of course, has big operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo as well. One of the few sort of financial people or fund managers there that I saw was Martin Valdez of RCF Fund. And he said, because of what's happening in Chile, they no longer consider Chile to be a tier one jurisdiction for mining investment. He added the caveat that he doesn't consider Canada or the US to be tier one either. So all in all, some very interesting things came out of that conference.
Of course, Chile right now is looking at changing its constitution, it's changing its regulations, and so far it seems like that is kind of marching forward. So we saw in 2021 just a lot of M&A activity, and then this brings in coal as well too. You've seen a lot of activity up in the north with the mergers and acquisitions. Pretium, of course, going to Newcrest. What the deal also that they had with Imperial Metals as well too. People are looking for a little bit more, how would you say, certainty around ESG, certainty around regulations. Paul?
Obviously, the political landscape in Chile and the constitutional process garnered a lot of attention at the event. It was, the talking point of a lot of the panels. The mining minister, Mrs. Hernando, she gave some very clear messaging. One, the government of Gabriel Boric does not want to nationalize any economic activity, least of all mining. She said categorically the country wants more mining in order to meet the government's aims at increasing social aspects in terms of health, education, pensions, etc. So they see mining as a key part of that. Again, she was very categorically clear that the government does intend to increase its take from the mining sector, whether that's through taxes or a royalty. The government's going to put forward a tax reform. I believe it's going to file that or in June. So that's probably going to include some things related to greater taxation in mining. Now, the constitutional process is separate from the government. It's because it's being sort of debated by an independent body. However, a large number of the delegates in that body are aligned or supporters of the government. And so it does seem that there will be some moderation, some degree of moderation to some of the wacky ideas that have been, or wacky proposals that have come out so far. The government, the feeling of people is that the government wants the constitutional process to be successful, but it's exercising soft power, if you like, to try and have moderation in the proposals going forward that will eventually make it into the final document that the entire population will vote on later this year.
Let's turn to mining news. Two big uranium stories: Australian listed Deep Yellow and Vimy Resources merge, which will have an estimated market cap of 658 million. And it will have 160 million in cash equivalents. The company has assets in Australia and Africa. Australia's Paladin Energy announced that it was going to do a $250 million equity raise to fund the restart of its Namibian mine. Of course, uranium prices have been on a tear. Uranium prices gained as much as 40% since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, touching levels that the market hasn't seen in more than a decade. That, according to Barron's. Keeping with energy, Cornish Metals announced a big investment on the start of the week, with a lot of money coming from Mick Davis's Vision Blue Resources. Vision Blue's contributed over 30 million. Markets didn't really like the deal, with Cornish Metals trading down after the announcement. Cornish will use the funds to advance a former tin mine in the UK. Tin has been on a tear again for forecast demand basted for needed energy transition. And lastly, turning to the Golden Triangle, number one gold miner Newmont is busy in the area. Newmont announced it was acquiring land to address concerns raised by the Tahltan nations. The mining claims on Iskut are not being purchased for development or further mineral potential, said Newmont in a news release. Newmont acquired GT Gold in the Golden Triangle about a year ago for 311 million. Help me out here, Cole. There's been a ton of activity in the area. We've seen headlines from Newcrest, from Barrick, from Newmont. Tell us about the region. What have been the most significant developments in the Golden Triangle in the past 12 months?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, Michael, there's obviously lots going on, so it's hard to pin it down to one, but I'll have to give you my top three, I guess. But the cornerstone, I think, of that is what you discussed earlier, is Newcrest's deal with Pretium, or buying out the Brucejack mine. Has worth with a view of about 3.5 billion Canadian. And I think what's most significant about that is, the Brucejack mine, the Brucejack deposit's obviously in a very difficult location. I'm sure people have seen photos of where that mine's located, and Pretium did an incredible job building it. But now you've got the skill and experience of Newcrest, one of the best underground miners, I would consider them, in the world, that is coming in, and they're going to be able to unlock the long-term value of that project. That I think, there might have been some naysayers out there worried about how long that mine life could actually be and how long they could sustain the grades that they've been mining over the last few years. So I think Newcrest is going to be, their involvement is going to be really important in seeing that long-term value.
Other developments, so you're talking about, yeah.
Beyond that, again, hard to summarize. Let's say I put number two, and actually, if you looked at last fall, Newcrest put it. I'm going to sound like a Newcrest spokesperson here. Geez, if I'm not careful. But they put the new pre-feasibility study out on the Red Chris, which is a joint venture deal between them and Imperial Metals. And I think it goes into the importance and something I'm a big believer of in there. And if you look at the kind of projects that Newmont's buying, as well as these copper gold alkalic porphyry systems. We were talking about copper earlier, of course, talking about gold being in the Golden Triangle, but really it is two stories in one when you talk about British Columbia. The NPV on a project, 3.2 billion, 17% IRR, 31-year mine life. And I'm just trying to pull it off the top of my mind. I think it was something around $180 an ounce in the all-in sustaining cost. So, Paul mentioned Mark Bristow earlier as well. It goes into all these same theories where it's really difficult. You look from a gold miner perspective of how other projects can compete when you've got a mine that can produce over 300,000 ounces a year at an all-in sustaining cost. Of course, this is what the copper factored in at $180 an ounce, right? It's really remarkable. The third thing that this is, there would be some honorable mentions, but we can't get into them all. But one that maybe I haven't heard as many people talk about is Hochschild's resource update at Snip. For people who might not be familiar with Snip, Snip was a gold mine, that Caminco gold mine produced back in the 1990s, about 1 million ounces at an average grade of 27.5 grams per ton. Now, the issue with that at the time was there was only accessible by aircraft or a hovercraft, 100,000-pound hovercraft that traveled from Alaska over 100 kilometers up into service the mine, of course, diesel powered. Well, if you look, fast forward 35 years, that mine now sits 20 kilometers from a $2 billion hydroelectric power facility that is road accessible. So the mineral economics has obviously significantly changed, and Hochschild, with their joint venture with Skeena, has managed to triple that resource in a relatively short period of time to about 1.5 million ounces at just over 10 grams per ton. So truly, tier one type grades with resources only looking to grow.
Thanks for highlighting those stories, Cole. Paul, you had a comment.
Yes, Cole. I mean, you talked about Newmont a bit, but let's go back to sort of Mark Bristow and Barrick Gold. Last week, obviously, Barrick Gold sold its shareholding in Skeena Resources, which has the Eskay Creek project in the Golden Triangle. What is the sort of thinking or thoughts or the gossip, if you like, in the Golden Triangle about that? Was that a surprise? Was that disappointing? Or conversely, does that open the door potentially for somebody else to sort of come in and have a chat with Walter?
Yeah, it's to be honest, it was a bit surprising, but I think, it goes into maybe, and I don't want to risk, I always got to be careful, of course, being involved with a company in the area and not stirring the pot on what could be going on. But this is purely speculation, but it might tie into the types of deposits that you think Mark Bristow is talked about publicly, is looking at. We've of course seen the work he's doing right now in Pakistan and Balochistan with Reko Diq, and what I'm a big believer in is, again, these copper gold porphyry systems. If you want these really long mine, 30 plus year mine life type deposits that can produce significant amounts of copper and gold, not just gold, those are the kind of deposits you need to chase after. Of course, Eskay Creek was as everyone knows, the highest grade gold mine in production in the world at its time, along with silver. But if you, again, my speculation on it, if you look at, I think, where Mark Bristow's focus is, in particularly bringing the copper production within Barrick up, Eskay doesn't have a significant copper component to that. So that may be, part of the thoughts in there. But like I said, pure speculation. Not to take away from the significance of that project, though. Skeena's done an incredible job bringing that resource into where it is today. And I think it's going to be one of the next mines to go forward in the next couple of years here.
The second part of my question, does that pave the way or open the door for somebody else to come in?
It very well could. There's of course, we've talked about a few big names of who's has made deals thus far, I should say, in the area, but that's not to say that there isn't more big names than who've already done deals that are certainly coying and looking around and doing their due diligence. So I don't want to speculate on who could be doing that, but I'm sure there is deals to be had.
Well, that'd be great TV if you would.
Yeah. Gotta be careful with that one.
I was also going to add, I was wondering if, Barrick has already got its hands full with what it's advancing or trying to advance up in Alaska as well, too. So I assume that maybe they want some regional focus that way. But again, that's just speculation. Cole, one of the stories that you hear over and over again in the Golden Triangle is glaciers receding and then just uncovering more territory.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those mixed things. I've talked about this a bit before. And frankly, if you were to ask me this question a few years ago, I'd say, yeah, it's there, not really significant. But over the last 3-4 years, particularly with Enduro, that's kind of part of our story, but other companies as well, where we've really seen some significant ice, and not only ice or glaciers, but permanent snow retreat in the area. And it's one of those mixed things. Of course, you look at, as you know, I'm a geoscientist first. I always like to think of it, and so there's the mixed feelings. Are you seeing these massive ice sheets melting back? I mean, there's still plenty of ice for them to melt back into, but it's really in another way opening up the metals, of course, that the world needs for this electrified global transition for our economies, right? So it's happening at the right time, and it's unlocking immense opportunity for all the companies in the area.
Just a recap on the region. It's that whole Alaska Panhandle. It's extremely wet. There's a lot of rain, and all of that slams into the coast mountains. So if you're in the area, huge mountains, huge amount of glaciers, very challenging terrain up there. Just beautiful terrain when the clouds clear. But also that brings us back to what are kind of the latest on the infrastructure developments and getting power up to there, Cole.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. That's really the most important thing for the whole area and how it's developed. I think you got to look at it really over the last decade, and I'd say the cornerstone on that being the hydroelectric power. There's a $2 billion run of the river hydroelectric power facilities going in, with another $750 million investment from the provincial government for the Northwest Transmission Line. And that's really what has been able to transform, because like we talked about earlier, whether it be SNP, SK, some of these mines who were producing in the 90s and 2000s, these were either not a road accessible at all or very remote, and very significantly they were diesel powered. Now you have some of the cheapest greenest electricity available right at their doorstep. But it goes beyond that. That's the $130 million that's gone into investments. The Port of Stewart, that's Canada's northernmost ice-free port, is just a 2-hour drive south of this area. That's currently where Red Chris's concentrate is being shipped to Asia today. And you also see, look at the announcement Seabridge made recently here, their $225 million financing with Ontario Teachers Pension Fund and Sprott Resources. Big chunk of that moving forward. I remember the exact term they coined it with, but substantial. It's not a construction decision, but essentially the work to get to there. And one of the biggest investments in that is going to be, again, hydroelectric power, working with the government in bringing it to their site, as well as plans for 33 kilometers in road expansion to get down to the south of KSM. So it's, all of these we're talking about are project specific things. That's not, I'm not including the $3.5 billion in mine construction just in between Red Chris and Bruce Jack as well, which has its associated infrastructure. But it's all these projects end up, building up on top of each other. One thing goes, and then it's much more manageable for the next project to add an arm onto that, if you will. And the more arms there are through the area, the better the mineral economics for everybody.
Which project do you think is the next to become a mine?
Oh, great question. Well, I think if you're talking in the short term, SK or SNP, would probably be the most likely. What I got to say, I've turned around my thoughts on quite a bit recently in a positive sense is what Seabridge is doing with KSM. I think they've obviously done a tremendous job in the 20 years they've had the project, bring it to what is I believe the largest, depending on how you cut it, undeveloped gold project in the world. And talking on that financing they just did, and looking at the partners bring in, like I said, the Ontario Teachers Pension and Sprott Resources. These are very, very sophisticated partners in encouraging to see their involvement. And I think that's a vote of confidence to their position on Seabridge's ability to get an operating partner to put KSM into production. And if that does go through, that is a wave of activity for the area that'll be unlike anything that it's seen before.
Paul?
But KSM, that they'll still need to raise more than $1 billion, and depending on your viewpoint, the economics are still sort of quite marginal, aren't they? So that's going to be tough to finance still, even with that recent financing. Yeah,
absolutely. It's not set in stone by any means. And like I said, I'm a big believer in more the alkalic stuff, where you've sort of got the equal copper to gold ratio. I know that's more of there's copper there as well, but more of a gold rich system. But like I said, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that and see how that develops.
Lastly, Cole, we'll finish with Enduro news over the next 12 months.
Yeah, so more news coming from the work we've been doing. We've, really it's a collection of 3 years of groundwork, bringing our greenfields targets up to snuff. As we were talking about earlier, the investment particularly in the copper space is, of course, trying to be focused in brownfield sites with a quicker path to production, knowing the severe issues in the supply side with the copper business. But of course, there's only a finite amount of brownfields projects that you can do that to, right? So I think you're going to start to see a transition, particularly in the recognition of we call the whole area the Golden Triangle, but like I said, it's copper and gold are a story in the same with area. And I think you're going to start to see a recognition by some other majors over the next year as to the not only the gold, but the significant copper content that we can find there. And that's really part of Enduro's stories as well as other companies. So we're looking forward to, we don't have the exact plans out yet, but we anticipate tripling the size of our drill program in 2022 compared to what we did the year before, and really building out on that copper and gold focus of these alkalic systems that everyone seems to be looking for.
Thank you, Cole. That's it for us. Follow me at Michael McCrae, MCCRAE. Paul, how are we getting a hold of you these days?
Twitter is at Paul Harris Gold.
And Cole, how would you like people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, best ways through our website. You email, or you can call our communications, investor relations, if you like, by phone, or as well as any social media for Facebook. I'm not the social media guy. I don't have Twitter or anything like that, but we have our channels through there that people can get in touch as well.
Paul Harris likes conferences in Latin America so much that he's actually going to be hosting his own. Paul, when's your conference coming up?
That's right, Michael. Thank you. 6th and 7th of June in Quito, Copper and Gold.
I want to congratulate Kitco's CEO of the Year recipients. That was Richard Hyde at West African Resources and Chris Taylor at Great Bear. We had a great video with them, some great questions by the recipients of each other. So go and watch that video. Hey, if you like what you hear, tell a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the Roundtable. On behalf of Paul Harris, Cole Evans, and myself, have a pleasant weekend.